everybody. Welcome back to the Bold Strokes Bookathon UK, where it's been an amazing weekend of panels and authors and talks and chats and random information that you probably never knew you needed to know. I'm going to put out a list of this information at the end of the thing, which you should find interesting. This next panel is our penultimate panel, Imaginary Friends, followed by the Art of Publishing at 6 o'clock. So please do come back for our final panel after this as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Gun.
So welcome everybody. And we have this amazing panelists here. We're still waiting for one of them. We hope she will show up really soon. So I will read your little introduction of you, and then we can get on to the questions. We'll start with Julie Cannon. So, wave, yeah, right. Julie Cannon. Exactly. Julie Cannon divides her time by being a corporate suit, a wife, mom, sister, friend, and writer. Julie and her wife have lived in at least a half a dozen states, traveled around the world, and have an unending supply of dedicated friends. And of course, the most important people in their lives are their kids. Number one, is that right? Or
that's right. That's what we call her. Number one.
Number one.
Number one child.
Cool. Dude and the Divine Miss M. Julie's novel, I Remember, won the Golden Crown Literary Society's Best Lesbian Romance in 2014. Corinne Claxton is the author of the vampire novel Scarlet Thirst. Her short stories have appeared in a number of anthologies and magazines, including Erotic Interludes 3, 4, and 5 from Bold Strokes Books. She has recipes in the Butch Cookbook, and her poems have been published by Only Women Press and La Pluma. Corinne is the technician and lighting designer for theater. She was festival director for YLAF, Young Lesbian Art Festival, 2007 till 2009. She's a qualified medical herbalist and lives in London. Michel De Field is a hopeless romantic living in the UK with her long-term partner. She loves books, tea, traveling, tea, theater, and tea. She's a frustrated linguist who is overly tall and has always wanted to be left-handed. She's a passionate public servant and randomly a qualified football referee. Home is always where the heart is. And Nathan Burgoyne.
Hello.
Hi. Aurora and Lambda Literary nominated Nathan Burgoyne is a tall queer man who usually writes shorter queer fictions. His short stories, novels, novellas, and collections excuse me, tend to toss found families, something magic or something psychic, and maybe a geek or two in alongside the queerness. He lives in Ottawa with husband Dan and husky Max. And you find his website at nathanburgoyne.com. And when Dee Jackson Lee, who is supposed to be here as well, when she shows up, I will introduce her. So I think we should start maybe with a question or two. Is that okay? So I thought I'd ask the question and then I'll point to you to answer. Seem to have worked for other moderators, so I think we'll stick in with that. So, which of your characters do you think is most like you? And if there's anyone, obviously, who is totally alien to you. So we can start with Julie.
I don't think any of my characters are like me. I think I want to be like them. They're just the perfect person in my mind. So when I'm in a meeting or if I'm faced with a situation, I think, okay, what would Elliot do in this situation? Or what would Shively do in this situation. So I channel my characters the other way around.
Okay.
And I get some serious mileage out of that. It kind of works for me. Mm-hmm. Because
Excellent.
they've already had the chance to have the perfect dialogue, the perfect perception of things, because it takes weeks to figure that out instead of the instant that you have to do that yourself in a particular situation. So I channel them quite often. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that is excellent, because then they don't have to think of, oh, I should have said that.
That's right.
You've already figured that out for them.
Yes.
They can just, as we say in Sweden, you can just sail through on a shrimp sandwich like that.
Okay, I'll go with that. I'll wait, let me write that down. I'll go with that.
So Nathan, what do you say?
I'm going to agree with Julie that my characters are far more competent than I will ever be. But I do have one character, Ian, who is very much me in multiple ways. So his original name is Christian, and he dropped the Christ from it and became Ian. My original name was Jonathan, and I dropped the J-O to make Nathan. He's heterochromic, I'm heterochromic, and his family was not great, and my family was not great. So I channeled a lot of my life experiences into Ian, and that's from Of Echoes Born. But other than that, no, everyone else is way smarter, way cooler. But yeah, I totally agree with Julie.
Okay. And Michelle?
I don't know, actually. I think maybe I should make my characters a bit cooler, because they're kind of hopeless sometimes, like I am. So yeah, there's definitely bits of them that I recognize. I don't know, I think Cam, maybe, she has a tendency to talk too much. She likes to talk out problems, and her love interest is very diffident and silent a lot of the time. So I think talking and wanting to stop but not being able to stop, and knowing you're not helping is something I identify with. Hopefully not today, but in general. So yeah, Cam probably. She's very unlike me in lots of other ways, but I think I really resonated with that quality of hers when I was writing it. It felt very familiar. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I've been known to talk, so I know the feeling. So, Corinne, do you have anyone that you think?
Oh, anyone that I'm like, or anyone that's like me? Sorry, you froze or something happened then?
I don't know.
Something happened. I think that Rob Pedoni from Scarlet Thirst is most like me, or I'm most like Rob. He's butch. He's got an identity around that. He's very much in a butch femme community. He's loyal and quite steadfast. I think there's a lot of me and Rob, or a lot of Rob in me.
Okay. Well, that sounds excellent. So let's see. Next question. Do you feel like you take on the role of one of your characters in your book when you're writing? Are you one person more than the other? We can start with Julie again. We'll take the same.
I think most of the time I do, and it probably is more the as I think about it, I do. I take on, I have that particular character's point of view in my mind, maybe a little bit more than the other character's point of view. One of the things I always tell my wife is the names of my characters while I'm writing, so that, if I do something or if I say a name, because I'm always thinking about them, or I'm taking notes, and what would so-and-so do in this particular situation? So she always knows when I'm definitely, hard at work on something. But I think, so that's me. I do take on one of the characters more often.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Before we continue with this question, I just want to introduce D. Jackson Lee, who just came. Yay!
Hey.
Yay. Welcome.
Hey guys.
Oh, so good to see you again. It's been a while.
Sorry, I had some technical problems.
Oh, well, we're so glad you came. So, D. Jackson Lee grew up barefoot and happy, swimming in a in farm ponds and riding rude ponies in rural South Georgia. Her passion for writing led her to a career in journalism and North Carolina, where she lives with the Terrors, her 3 mostly terrier mutts. She edits news at night and spends her days writing lesbian romance stories, laced with her trademark Southern humor and affection for horses. Jackson has won 3 Golden Crown Literary Society Awards for her novels and was a finalist in the romance category of the 2014 Landa Literary Awards. So the question we are talking about right now is, do you feel like you take on the role of one of your characters in your books when you're writing? So why don't you jump right in, Jackson?
I definitely think I do. I don't think that you can fully develop your characters unless you feel what they're feeling. And I think that most of us writers put pieces of ourselves in our characters. A lot of my characters are, if they're not pieces of me, they're also composites of people I know. It may be coworkers or friends. But there is usually one character in my books that I'm more vested in than others. But all of my characters have something of me in them to allow me to slip into them, to feel what they're feeling and to put that into words for the reader. Because I think that's how in a romance novel, that's how readers connect. They see a bit of themselves in the character, and that's how they invest in your story.
Yes, absolutely. I agree totally with that. So Nathan, what do you think?
I think I tend to try to put myself in their shoes, but there was I think it was Greg Heron who gave me this sort of writing tip, but I think I spend most of my time in a character's mind trying to figure out how their past has led them to this decision. So if I need them to do something, I'm always thinking sort of backwards with a character and wondering what in my life would have had to happen a certain way for me to make the decision I want this character to make. So I think for me, it's a lot of putting myself in hypothetical shoes and then translating it through the lens of what this character or this character's past will lead them to do.
Okay, yeah. Right. So, Michelle.
Yeah, I think it's different. I mean, definitely as a reader, I let myself just take one side of a romance novel and just enjoy sort of putting myself in the character's position. And I think about some of the just really sweet books that I read, and I really enjoy imagining myself in that on the other end of that sort of romance. I think as a writer, I just try and be more even-handed and just slip into, a bit like Nathan was saying, really slip into those shoes for when I need to, and then slip out again. So I don't think that they're like me or I want to be them in that way. I just think I agree with Nathan. I think I'll slip in, I'll put myself in their position, I'll try and find points of identity. I mean, one of my novels is about a girl band pop singer who's closeted. I've never been any of those things, but I can imagine myself in certain situations. So I'll try it on and then leave it to one side and try something else.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I would love to be a girl in a pop.
Me too.
Sounds so cool. And I could
future, but yeah.
I could see my grandchildren cringing at the idea. So, Corinne, do you step inside one of your characters more than others, or what do you do?
Not more than others. I find that I get inside the head of whichever character's point of view I'm writing at that moment. I need to get inside their heads to know how they think and feel and how they're going to respond to any given situation or danger or whatever the point of the novel is. So I kind of immerse myself in each character as I'm writing them.
Okay, well, that makes sense. So let's see if we have any. We can put one of the Q&A thing. Let's see. Here's a cool one we could just go around the room with. As a writer, what would you choose as your mascot, avatar, or spirit animal? Julie, what would you pick?
Oh, wow. I would say wow. I don't know if it's a spirit animal, but I would say a dog, probably. You know, I've got a couple of them, and I've always had dogs in my lives, and what a life, you know, they just hang around and follow you, and they love you unconditionally. They don't need much in terms of entertainment. So I think I'd have to say probably a dog. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they adore you no matter what.
Absolutely, no matter what.
No matter what.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jackson?
Well, obviously mine would be a horse because most of my books are in equestrian settings. Not all of them now. Ordinary is Perfect, which has by far been my bestseller, did not have a horse, and it had a dog instead, Elvis the dog. But a horse or a dragon horse for my fantasy series. I think I might have been a horse in a previous life. I don't know. They're so powerful, and they're free, and they're also very, what you see is what you get. Horses have no, there's no deviousness about them. They are what they are. They're very open, and if they don't like you, they don't like you. If they do, they do. And they've done studies that show that horses can actually read human expression, and they remember people, and they respond to human expression and body language, and I like it. Mine would definitely be a horse.
Okay. Nathan, you and I have talked dogs. I know that. Nottingham.
As much as I love my rescued husky, I think my answer is actually going to be dragonfly. But that's partly because of an experience I had when I was living in British Columbia. I had literally just come out to the first person I had ever come out to. We were sitting in a cabin. It had been pouring down, this little tiny shack. Cabin's too grandiose a word. And after the rain passed, suddenly there were dragonflies everywhere. And that moment just stuck with me. Every time I see a dragonfly, I just remember that moment. So I think that's the animal, insect, whatever, that stays with me.
Oh, wow. That grabbed me by the heart so much. It did.
Beautiful.
So, Michelle, what about you?
So my first instinct, so I won't overthink it, was my avatar would be an astronaut. I lack all of the qualities to be an astronaut. I'm not brave, and space and the universe and eternity terrifies me, but I'm kind of obsessed by it. And I'm a little bit obsessed by Valentina Tereshkova, who was the first woman in space who went up in some little circular pod that you could barely just sit in, that looked like it wouldn't clear 5 meters, let alone get up into space. So there's something about astronauts that I'm really drawn to. So a little cool avatar of me in an astronaut helmet. I'm not sure how good that would look, but yeah, an astronaut, just that space, the universe, the it's an incredible kind of feeling, I think.
Absolutely. And Corinne?
I'd go with a spirit animal. That's a great question, Kerry. Actually, thanks for the question. I'd go with bear, which means spirit animal, which means introspection for writing, because I think there's a lot of hibernation involved in the creative process. So going inside to yourself and drawing stuff out and then pushing it out there, lots of emerging in the spring, hopefully, with all kind of stuff bubbling up. So bear seems to feel right to me for writing.
I know I'm not supposed to insert myself as a moderator, but I think as my spiritual guide, I think a bumblebee because legend says it's not supposed to be able to fly with such a big body and such tiny little wings, and yet it does. And so it's not letting anything stop it. And it's also perhaps from ignorance, because it doesn't know it's not supposed to be able to fly. So
Yeah.
maybe that's something, you just aimlessly go along and just hope for the best. So, but that was great answers, all of them. I just loved hearing that. So let's see. Diverse characters, writing a character whose experience you have no first-hand knowledge about. What are your thoughts? Julie?
That's really hard, because you have to do a lot of research, talk to a lot of people, because you have to make it as realistic as you possibly can. There's nothing worse as a reader in reading something and saying, that's not the way that it is, or they would never do something like that. So you have to do just a ton of research on what that particular thing or the situation that they find themselves in. You need to do that. And I think as authors, we all have gotten an email from someone that has been, maybe a little overly critical about a situation or a scene or something like that. But then you have to think, this is fiction, for starters. So you really just have to do your best to try to portray it in the most realistic, respectful fashion that you possibly can. Especially if there's some trauma involved in it or something like that, you've got to be very, very careful.
Absolutely. So, Jackson.
I've wanted for a long time to diversify some of my characters. I've been reluctant because of the same thing that Julie talked about, fearful that I might not correctly portray some characters, because I wouldn't want to gloss over something that's not. One thing that stuck with me, I had a copy editor that worked for me once, a black copy editor, and she was having a discussion with another copy editor that worked for me who was gay and newly out, and she was like, baby butch and real, hey, I'm gay, what do you want to, she was real, that belligerent stage, where what do you got to say about it, and she was saying how, when I walk in a room, people know I'm gay, and the black copy editor said, no, they don't. You can walk in a room and all they can tell is that you have a short haircut. They can think maybe you're gay, but when I walk a room, there's no way that people don't know that I'm black, and bring with them all the prejudices against me. And you can't, as a white person, you can't know how that feels. You can't possibly. Now, I have a niece who has a mixed race son, and with all that's going on in the U.S. right now, I'm very fearful for my little 4-year-old great nephew when he becomes a teenager and he's not with my family members. We're all white. I also have a mixed race great niece who's half Latino. Her dad's Honduran, and I worry about them, especially Finn, the little boy. He's already a head taller than his peers. He's going to be a large guy, and when he's a teenager, when he's out driving, and he gets stopped by one of these cops. So I worry about things when you're writing characters like that. I have written black characters in my fantasy novel, but the dilemma is, do you point out in the book that this is a black character, or you just write it and lay hints that that maybe, because if you say they have dreadlocks or they're not, that doesn't really say that they're black, because you can be a white person and have dreadlocks, or you can be something else. So it's a very touchy thing. I've also wanted to write a trans character. So I did branch out a bit in my fantasy trilogy, the Dragon Horse War trilogy, because it's easier to do that. I had a third gender character that that was, you know, some ambiguous, had a gay character. And when I wrote some of the gay character, I consulted with Greg. I sent him a scene that ultimately ended up getting cut out because it really didn't move the plot forward. But I wanted to make sure that I was writing this gay character correctly, so I consulted with an editor who is gay. And I think it's important to do that, to have, if you're going to write a character that is not your ethnicity, that you need to have a beta reader or beta readers or editor who can make sure that you're on track.
Yeah.
That, you know.
Exactly. Maybe additional insight. Yeah.
Yes.
So, okay, Nathan, we touched on this in another panel, I think, a little bit, but please, what are your thoughts?
So my opinion is that as a writer, our responsibility is to write the world the way it is, the way, like, as diverse as it is. Writing characters who exist shouldn't be a massive challenge, but I also come down pretty firmly on the side that we should be elevating own voice narratives. And so I will write very diverse characters. I generally will not take the point of view. And I am very careful not to be trying to tell their stories. For example, in Exit Plans for Teenage Freaks, my main character's father is deaf and is running a joint interpretation business. That one step removed is something that I was comfortable with, is I'm adjacent to the deaf community. I can do that fairly well, but even so, I hired an interpreter to look it over, or two interpreters to look it over. I had two deaf, hard of hearing sensitivity readers. So I think we cannot just pretend that the characters don't exist. And I do come down on the side of, no, if the character is Black, you say they are Black. If you leave it up to interpretation, readers are going to interpret everyone to be like them. Or the default white, and I think that's a disservice. And even when you do call it straight out, I don't know if any of you remember the furor over the Hunger Games when Rue, the actress who played Rue, is Black, and the character was written as Black, and still all these people who read the books thought she was white and were really upset that it wasn't a white actress playing a white role. So if you don't write it in there and be very clear about it, I think you are doing a disservice to showing the world as diverse as it is. But mostly I think our role as writers is to read diversely, to lift diversity. Like, so if you've read something, and read outside your bubble, share it, make noise, because as we all know, the marketing machine generally favors the white, especially the straight, especially the able-bodied, especially. So that's where I sort of come down on it.
I agree totally. Absolutely. So, Michelle, what do you think?
I was just listening with real interest. I mean, I'm quite new, relatively, like a newbie. So I think I'm still building my confidence and finding my voice as a romance writer, and feeling confident about telling stories well. So I think it's sort of inevitable that you start with what seems most close to you, what seems most familiar. I think in the book that's coming out later this year, I wrote a mother for the first time, which is a diverse character for me. I'm not a mother. I've not written that before. I don't think always there is more mothers in lesbian romance, but there isn't always. That usually or often go-getting single people. So I felt that was quite important for me. I know a lot of mothers, and I think I lived in London for a really long time. My friendship group is massively diverse. It would be perverse if trans people or people of colour didn't make it into my novels, because it would just be really strange given my friendship group. But I, again, as people have said, would want to be entirely sensitive. The book that I'm working on now has a trans character who has a romance, not one of the main characters. And it's really important. I think it's important to be sensitive and to write that well, but it's really important to include trans characters within lesbian romance too, given what's going on in the world. I think if we can give a lift or a voice or visibility to groups that are, as we say in England, being shut on regularly, I think we should. So I think it's important. I'm still very new to it, so I'm treading super, super carefully.
Thank you. Corinne, what do you think?
Thanks. I think that diversity in writing is vital. There's two things that I think about this subject. One is that it's so important that representation of different voices is supported in the writing industry, in publishing and writing. And I totally give my support wholeheartedly to people writing their own, writing from their own backgrounds and representing communities that are marginalised and aren't heard as often. And secondly, as a writer myself, I think it's so important to reflect the world that I inhabit. And I live in a world that is very, has a lot of people from all kinds of backgrounds. I work and play and socialise with people from different nationalities, different backgrounds, different disabilities, abilities, different faiths, and vary on the gender and sexuality spectrum. So I can't think of not including characters, diverse characters in my work. And I think that there can be an awkwardness around writing. I have concerns that I try to take things into account when I'm writing characters from a background different to mine. And I try to do two things. One, educate myself as widely as I can. And I think we've got so much available to us now on the World Wide Web, and there is so much information out there from multiple points of view that that's something that's quite accessible to most people. And I also have support from beta readers who know me, know my politics, know where I'm coming from, know what I want to do, and are helpful. Consultants, I would call them consultants. So, and I also think at this particular moment in time, looking at what's going on worldwide when people are demonstrating against police brutality and racial injustice, I think that as a writer, I can help to propel the momentum that we have at the moment to push for real change, to make things better by keeping people in the forefront of my work who are in my world, basically. So that's my answer to that.
Thank you. I saw a question here in the question and answer box, and it's, was there a specific character, not author, but character, who inspired you to be a writer? It's Jerry Wheeler who's asking this. So I think we should skip to someone else starting first now to let Julie off the hook for a little bit. So we take Nathan. Yeah, he looks so happy there. So let's.
I think I have an easy answer. Michael Mouse Tolliver from Tales of the City. Yeah, it was the first time I read a queer character who had the same relationship with his family that I had, but had also found a found family to replace the biological one. So that I realized that story was okay, and that it was all right to exist outside of your biological family. And that was a huge thing to come across at the age when I did. And that has dripped into every piece of writing I've written since.
Okay, excellent. So Michelle.
I was trying to think, like, I don't know if I can name a particular character, but I'm old enough, sadly, to have been brought up on sort of Secret Seven and Mallory Towers and Famous Five books with that sort of larks and adventures. And there was always one of that crowd that was always slightly tomboyish, thank goodness, who never got to wear pigtails and got their knees muddy. So I think for me, I know there's lots wrong with those books when you look back on them now, but as a young person,
I read those too.
Yeah, I enjoyed them very much, and they sort of got me thinking about those sort of worlds that you can create, and got me writing stories for the first time as a very young person. So yeah, I not one particular character, but that sort of group of books. Yeah, for sure.
Cool. I can relate to that, absolutely. Corinne?
I'm with Michelle on this. Because I was sort of was creative writing, not novels, but you know, whatever, as a child, and I think that probably Famous Five did influence me. That kind of story where you could just really lose yourself in and adventure, excitement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So now, Julie. So
I would say none. You know, I haven't read anything that any particular character or situation really jumped out at me. I will say that it's more of the whole lesbian fiction genre, I guess. The more and more I read it, the more I thought, you know, I'd like to take a try at something like this. So it wasn't anything one particularly. It's everybody on this call and you know, on the other ones, anyone who writes any kind of alternative, you know, gay or lesbians or bi or trans fiction, that really got me thinking about it.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
So Jackson, what do you think? Any character you can think of, or books
They get me started writing.
that inspired you to might want to start writing? Excuse me.
Well, I'm a career journalist, but reporting's not the same as writing. I don't love this great teacher. We had an assignment that she said our assignment was to write something short that conveyed emotion. And that was the first thing I ever wrote. And I wrote a short story that I took from, I had a childhood friend that went on vacation with his family, and he and his brother, they were at Lookout Mountain, and they crawled over a barrier, and David fell off the mountain and was killed. And, you know, it was devastating to his family, and so I took that and I wrote a story about a woman and a little toddler, and they stopped for a picnic, and it sounds horrible. And the kid crawled over the thing and fell off the mountain, and the mother was horrified. And so I won this little contest in the 11th grade, and the teacher gave me $2.50 for writing this horrible story about this toddler, you know, falling off and she told me later, she said, you should be a writer. Well, I just dismissed it and didn't think anything of it. So you could say it was that, but it actually was, I read L.J. Moss, and I don't know if anybody remembers her, but she was one of the early lesbian writers. And
Yes.
she wrote a book, Meridio's Daughter, which I just loved. And I read it, and I couldn't find anything else. This was like when I hadn't discovered the lesbian fan fiction online yet, and I was working nights as supervising a copy desk, so I didn't watch TV. I was working when everybody else was watching Xena and everything, so I had no knowledge of that. And so I didn't know anything about that. So I read her book. I couldn't find anything else in the bookstore to read, because there was nothing. You went to the local gay bookstore, the White Rabbit, and there was nothing but gay books and stuff from Naiad that was months, years old. They never had the current stuff. And so I wrote my first book, Bareback, I wrote to entertain myself, because I couldn't find any other lesbian fiction. And that's how I started writing.
Okay.